So really quick, I just want to give a quick overview on a Unity basic about game objects and components. So just really quick, just to get these ideas out there. So if we open up Unity, we're in our project. Um, so like we talked about last time, we have these kind of four main windows, right? So we have our project down here, which includes our assets folder, which is all the objects that go into our game. So materials, prefabs, our scenes, our scripts. This is everything in our game. So these are all the puzzle pieces we can use to put into our scene in order to make a level. In our level, each level is made up of all the objects in the hierarchy. So over here in my hierarchy, so you have three things. I have a main camera, directional light, and a cube. Um, so uh, the way that Unity works is everything in a scene, every individual scene is a game object. Okay, so I'm going to click create and go to create empty, which is going to create our basic game object. So a basic game object is invisible. It's just these arrows, and these arrows do not appear in our game. They are just for us to move this around. And so a game object at its very base has a couple things. It has one component called a transform. And the transform is on every single game object. So you can see the cube has a transform, directional light has a transform, main camera has a transform. It also has a name. And so the name is just how we give it a different name. So like cube's name is cube, directional light's name is directional light. And we can name these whatever we want. I can name it ground if I want. Ground if I want. But I'm going to name it, I'm going to keep it as game object. It also has game object. It also has a tag and a layer. The way we kind of move things around our scene is with these transform tools. You might recognize these. So we have the position, which affects the position of the transform. The rotation, which affects the rotation of the transform. Okay. And the scale, which affects the scale of the transform. Also, this value, which we can't really affect on an empty game object, this tool here, just affects the scale and the position at the same time, and it lets you kind of drag by the corners. So that's like an interesting kind of little tool. So that's an empty game object. Here's the transform. So the thing that makes a game object into a cube is, or into a directional light or into a camera, is its components. And components are these little subsections over here in the inspector. Okay, so a cube is made up of a transform, like all game objects, and then a cube mesh filter, which is the mesh filter is the basic shape. Okay, so it's letting it know that it has like, I don't know, 16 points, and those points are connected in a certain way. Um, that's what the mesh filter does. It has a box collider, which is the green box around the shape, and that is its physicality. So this is where you can't pass into the cube. This is the hard surface of it, right? And it also has a mesh renderer. And the mesh renderer takes a material, um, and so there's the material. It has a bunch of values like receive shadows, and other stuff that we can affect, can cast shadows. So that's how it looks, basically. If we click on the camera, we can see that a camera has a camera component. That makes this game object into a camera, and it has a couple other things that Unity uses for sound, GUI, which is like the HUD, and something called a flare layer. So we don't need to worry about that stuff. But these components, five components, make this a camera. When we're making a game, we're creating and arranging game objects with specialized components. A light just has a light component in a certain way, and that makes this special. So if we want a player, if I open up this scene here, if we want a character, which I named player, I named the game object player. It just has a collider, so it has bounds, it has graphics, it has something called a character controller, which lets us control it, and then it has a script on it that we made, a custom script, and we can make custom scripts, and we add those as components that allows us to turn our keyboard inputs into movement. Okay, so if you look at the scene in which you can collect these cubes and give them to this NPC and get a key, and open a door. Okay, everything in the scene is its own game object. So the ground, the player, the camera, which is attached to the player, these walls, the door, and so the door is just a cube with the door script on it. That's the only thing that makes it a door. We have something called a collectible manager, which keeps track of how many collectibles you picked up and displays it in the UI. We have our collectibles, which are just cubes with a collectible script on it. We have our NPC, which is just another capsule with an NPC script on it. Okay, so this NPC, without this NPC script, is just a capsule sitting there by itself. But because we put this component on it, this NPC script component, it becomes an NPC. And so we could replace this capsule with like a 3D model of a person, a 2D image of a person. But the thing that actually gives it NPC behavior is this script. So that is a very basic overview of game objects and components.